In this movie, we'll be talking about text effects, specifically text shadow. If you're following along, you can open up texteffects.html from your working files folder. Also, if you've already watched the movie on box shadows, you'll find that text shadows are pretty much the same thing. So let's dive in. First of all, if we look at caniuse.com and search for text shadow, we can see that generally every browser supports it, aside from IE 9 and before. That's a bummer because text shadow is really fun to use. Generally, I tend to use text shadow anyway, even if I do have to support all the way back to IE 8 or even 9. The reason for that is that you usually would use text shadow in a subtle way, just to bring out text, to give it a little bit of an extra punch. By increasing the visibility of your text using text shadow, you'll find that a lot of the times, people won't even notice that there's a shadow on the text, but they will find the text really nice and easy to read. Let's make a very ugly and obvious text shadow first, just to demonstrate how it works. What I've done here is I've created a text shadow with an X offset of 1 pixel, a Y offset of 1 pixel, and a fuzziness of 2 pixels. The color of this text shadow is RGBA 0001, which is no red, no green, no blue, full opacity. In other words, 100% opaque black. Now with black text, I've found that a very good technique is to give it a subtle white text shadow. Let's try that. To get white, we type 255, 255, 255, and our desired opacity. I'm going to put it at 50% opacity. If I refresh, you can see that the text appears fairly easy to read. Now if you look away and then you look back at the text, you'll find that it doesn't have an obvious text shadow. In a production website, I might even make the opacity of this 0.3 or 0.4 to make it very subtle. But what's really fun is inspecting the element with the text shadow and turning it on and off in the inspector. You definitely notice a difference when you're toggling it. So that's pretty fantastic. However, we don't want to put text shadow on everything, everywhere, all the time. The main reason for that is performance. Especially if you're building a web app that has any kind of a movement or animation in it, shadows, box shadows and text shadows, can be computationally expensive to draw. So generally in my production code, I'll put a text shadow on the headers. Sometimes I will put a text shadow on the body text, but that's only if I don't have a lot of repaints happening in my document. If it's just a simple, static splash page, that's a good place to use text shadows pretty much whenever you want. Now there is one more thing I want to show you. I'm going to make a new DOM object here. I'm going to call it clone. Now I have some text up here that says clone me. One of the fun things that you can do with text shadow is you can actually create fake copies of things. You can do that incidentally with box shadow just the same. Here's an example. In this case, I'm creating a text shadow, 0 horizontal offset, 0 vertical offset, 0 fuzziness, and red. So what I'm going to do now is shift that text shadow over to one side. In this case, I'll shift it over to the right by 200 pixels, and sure enough now you see a cloned object. Now I haven't actually cloned the object, I've just made it look like I'm copying the text by using a text shadow. Usually people don't set the fuzziness to 0, they'll set it to something like 2 pixels. Then you have a really nice shadow that can go underneath the item. In any case, that's just a fun thing that you can do. Also, just as you can do with box shadow, you can make multiple shadows. All you have to do is make them and separate them with a comma. As it turns out, shadows are pretty easy to make. Now that it's this easy to add shadows to your text, there's no reason not to use it when it'll look good in your document.